Would you like to have dinner with us? A blind little black girl asked the lonely CEO sitting alone on Christmas Eve. We hope you understand that people like her just don't fit in at our family events, said Victoria Whitmore, James' mother, as she discreetly pointed to the photo on his cell phone. The image showed a black woman smiling next to a 6-year-old girl wearing sunglasses. It's Christmas, dear. Think of our reputation. James Whitmore, 34, CEO of the nation's largest educational technology company, sat silently in the living room of the family mansion. Around the mahogany table, his brothers exchanged knowing glances while his sister-in-law Margaret whispered something about these people always trying to infiltrate places where they don't belong. Besides, continued his father, Senator Richard Whitmore, adjusting his designer glasses, a child with disabilities would surely make everyone uncomfortable. You know how these families are, always wanting to draw attention to their limitations. James clenched his fist around his cell phone. He had met Rachel and her daughter Isabella 3 months ago when his company implemented a digital inclusion program in public schools. Rachel, a dedicated teacher at a suburban school, worked tirelessly to give opportunities to children whom society had forgotten. Isabella, despite being blind since birth, radiated a genuine joy that contrasted brutally with the falseness James faced daily. It's decided then, Victoria declared, pouring herself more champagne. Dinner will be just for the family, as it always should have been. James stood up without a word, grabbed his coat, and walked toward the door. In the hallway, he could hear Margaret's venomous whisper, "Thank God you've come to your senses." Imagine the embarrassment if someone from the press saw. 20 minutes later, James sat alone on a park bench in the city center, watching families pass by carrying gifts and smiles. His phone vibrated incessantly with messages from a family group commenting on his childish tantrum and how they should cut off his trust fund until he matures. What his family didn't know was that James had recorded the entire conversation. And what they definitely didn't know was that over the past 3 months, he had meticulously documented every racist comment, every prejudice joke, and every display of elitism he had witnessed at family gatherings and social events. "Excuse me, sir." A small, sweet voice made him look down. There was Isabella holding Rachel's hand, her sunglasses reflecting the Christmas lights in the square. "Would you like to have dinner with us? Mom made a turkey that smells really good." James felt something break inside his chest. While his multi-millionaire family rejected him for choosing to love inappropriate people, a blind little girl who barely knew him was offering him the little she had without asking for anything in return. "It would be an honor," he replied, standing up and offering his hand to Isabella. What neither Rachel nor Isabella could have imagined was that this simple invitation was about to set off a chain of events that would not only transform James' life, but completely redraw the power map of the city's most prejudiced elite. If you're enjoying this story of justice and revenge, don't forget to subscribe to the Black Voices channel, because what happens next will show that underestimating the kindness of a child can be the biggest mistake a family of racists can make. Rachel's apartment in suburban Brooklyn contrasted sharply with the Whitmore mansion. Hand-painted walls, simple but cozy furniture, and everywhere evidence of the unconditional love between mother and daughter. Isabella had decorated the refrigerator with embossed drawings, her art form adapted to blindness, while Rachel prepared a simple but thoughtful dinner. "Mommy always makes the best food when we have special guests," Isabella said, guiding James through the small room with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of the space. "You're special, aren't you?" James felt a lump in his throat. In the last 3 hours, a 6-year-old had offered him more genuine affection than his entire family had in decades. Meanwhile, his phone kept vibrating with increasingly venomous messages from the family group. "We hope you've come to your senses," Victoria had written. "People like us don't mix with that kind of people. It's a matter of natural order." Margaret had been even more direct. "James, dear, you can play at being charitable, but don't bring that woman and her troubled daughter to our events. Imagine if someone from high society saw them. Our reputation would be ruined." But it was his father's message that truly revealed the true nature of the Whitmore family. "Son, I know you think you're being noble, but these people always have ulterior motives. They see our wealth and make up stories to take advantage of us. It's best to keep your distance before they try to sue us or worse." James watched Rachel serve simple dishes with the same elegance Victoria displayed at gala dinners. The difference was that Rachel did it out of love while her mother performed out of social obligation. Isabella, sitting next to her, ate quietly as she recounted her adventures at school. Her words painting pictures more vivid than any painting James had ever seen in the museums frequented by the elite. "You know," Rachel said softly, noticing the tension on James' face, "Isabella told me that you work with schools. It must be rewarding to help children get an education." James almost laughed at the irony. His company, Whitmore Educational Technologies, did indeed work with digital inclusion, but the initial motivation had been purely financial, lucrative government contracts disguised as social responsibility. It was only after meeting teachers like Rachel that he began to understand the true impact of his work. "Actually," he confessed, "I think I learn more from the children than they do from me." Isabella stopped eating and turned her face toward him. "You look sad, Mr. James. Didn't your family come to dinner, too?" The innocent question hit him like a well-aimed arrow. James looked at this little girl who barely knew him, yet could sense his emotional pain just from the tone of his voice. While his own family, who had lived with him for more than 3 decades, had never shown the same sensitivity. At that moment, his phone rang. Victoria, obviously. "James, where the hell are you? We have Senator Morrison here asking for you. You're embarrassing us." "I'm having dinner with friends," he replied calmly. "What friends? We don't have friends in neighborhoods like wherever you are. Come home immediately." "No." The silence on the line was deafening. Victoria Whitmore wasn't used to hearing no from anyone, especially not from her son. "James," her voice now carried a dangerous coldness, "you're forgetting who finances your company. The family trust fund represents 60% of your initial capital. It would be a shame if that support were to be re-evaluated." Rachel and Isabella watched discreetly. They couldn't hear the conversation, but they could clearly sense that James was facing some kind of ultimatum. "I understand perfectly," James said, his voice maintaining the artificial calm he had learned in years of corporate negotiations. "Thank you for clarifying your position." He hung up and put his phone on silent. Rachel approached, offering him a cup of tea. "Family can be complicated," she said gently, not asking any intrusive questions. What Rachel didn't know was that as he sipped the simple, lovingly prepared tea, James was mentally reviewing 3 months of evidence he had gathered against his own family: recordings of racist dinner conversations, screenshots of prejudice messages in the family group chat, financial documents showing how the Whitmore Charitable Foundation was nothing more than a front for tax evasion. His educational technology company didn't depend on family money as much as Victoria thought. Over the past 2 years, James had secretly diversified his investors, anticipating exactly this kind of emotional blackmail. What his family didn't suspect was that he had meticulously documented every threat, every discriminatory comment, every attempt at financial manipulation. Isabella approached him after dinner holding a small folded piece of paper. "I drew you a picture," she said, handing him a sheet of paper where she had created textures and shapes in relief. "It's you smiling for real, not that sad smile you came in with." James held the paper as if it were the most precious object in the world. There was the most honest representation anyone had ever made of him, not the ruthless CEO, not the troubled heir, just a man who deserved to smile for real. As he said goodbye to Rachel and Isabella that night, James made a decision that would change everything. His back was against the wall. His family had shown its true colors, and he had enough evidence to expose decades of hypocrisy and prejudice disguised as family tradition. Each new humiliation only strengthened something inside him that his oppressors couldn't see: a silent force fueled by the very injustice they sought to impose. What those privileged people didn't know was that every act of contempt was writing their own sentence of defeat, and that the man they tried to control had ceased to be a victim the moment a blind little girl showed him how to see the truth. 3 days after dinner with Rachel and Isabella, James received a call that would change everything. On the other end of the line, the professional voice of David Chun, his lawyer and only true friend since college, carried an unmistakable urgency. "James, I need you to come to my office immediately and bring all those recordings you mentioned." David Chun wasn't just any lawyer, the son of immigrants who built a culinary empire from scratch. He had faced the same elitist prejudice that now consumed James' life. The difference was that David had turned every humiliation into fuel to become the most feared civil rights lawyer on the East Coast. "You won't believe what I found out about your family," David said, spreading documents across his office desk. "For the past 6 months, I've been quietly investigating the Whitmore Charitable Foundation, James. They're not just hypocritical racists. They're criminals." The evidence was devastating. Financial documents showed how the family foundation had diverted money intended for public schools, the very schools children like Isabella attended. Fraudulent contracts, systemic tax evasion, and most shocking of all, a network of corruption that involved local politicians in ensuring that Black and Latino families were removed from gentrifying neighborhoods. "Her family doesn't just despise people like Rachel and Isabella," David continued, pointing to a stack of legally intercepted emails. "They actively work to destroy their communities." James felt anger rising, but it wasn't the blind rage his family hoped to provoke. It was the controlled fury of someone who finally understood the true extent of the battle he needed to fight. "There's more," David said, turning on his laptop. "Remember that foundation gala where you recorded those racist comments about keeping certain people out of our events? Guess who was there that night? District Attorney Richardson, the same guy who systematically filed housing discrimination cases against Black families." The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together. James realized that his family wasn't just prejudiced. They were at the center of a network of corruption that perpetuated racial inequality at an institutional level. And now they had made the fatal mistake of threatening him at the very moment he had access to information that could destroy them completely. Meanwhile, the Whitmores continued to spectacularly underestimate him. Victoria had sent him a written ultimatum demanding that he cut himself off from these unsuitable people or lose access not only to the trust fund but also to the government contracts his company held through family connections. Margaret had gone even further, creating a WhatsApp group called Operation Bring Back to His Senses, where the family openly discussed strategies for making James understand his place in the natural social hierarchy. The messages were a toxic combination of explicit racism and financial sabotage planning. "Maybe we should invite that teacher to one of our events," Margaret wrote with venomous sarcasm. "It would be educational for her to see how truly civilized people behave." "Excellent idea," Victoria replied. "The contrast would be obvious. James would finally realize how ridiculous his little romantic fantasy is." What they didn't know was that James had discreetly hacked into the group 3 weeks earlier, documenting every hateful word, every discriminatory strategy, every plan for sabotage. His educational technology company had given him access to cybersecurity resources that no member of his family suspected he possessed. David Chun laughed as he reviewed the most recent messages. "They're literally documenting their own crimes and sending written confessions. It's like they've never heard of digital evidence. How much time do you need to prepare everything?" James asked, his voice carrying a cold determination that David recognized immediately. "For complete public exposure, reputational destruction, and criminal prosecution." 2 weeks, David replied, "But James," he paused, watching his friend closely, "are you sure? Once we do this, there's no turning back. His family will be publicly destroyed." James thought of Isabella drawing in relief to compensate for her blindness, of Rachel working 2 jobs to give her daughter dignity, and of the children in public schools who were systematically sabotaged by the family foundation that claimed to help them. "They've had decades to choose to be better people," James replied. "Now it's their turn to face the consequences of their choices." David smiled, recognizing the look he had seen in the mirror years ago when he decided to devote his career to destroying systems of oppression disguised as tradition. "Then let's get started. But first, I need you to do something very specific. At the next family dinner, I want you to agree to participate in the foundation's annual charity gala. Tell them you're ready to come to your senses and bring Rachel as your date." James raised an eyebrow. "You want me to expose Rachel to my family's venom?" "No. I want your family to expose themselves to the whole world, because that gala will be broadcast live on the Foundation's social media, and it will be exactly the stage we need for our final reveal." It was when everyone laughed that something unexpected began to take shape, not just in the luxurious surroundings where the Whitmores celebrated their own superiority, but mainly in the determined look that now shone with an intensity that made some of those present realize that something extraordinary was about to happen. For a moment, when James submissively agreed to attend the gala without questioning the humiliating conditions imposed by his family, everyone thought they would witness just another predictable capitulation, yet another rebellious heir finally knowing his place. But anyone watching closely would have noticed that it wasn't fear that kept his hand steady as he signed the foundation documents. It was the contained power of someone who was about to rewrite not only his own history, but topple an entire system of oppression that masqueraded as family tradition. The Whitmore Charitable Foundation's annual gala had never received so much media attention. 300 guests from the social, political, and business elite gathered at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, all eager to participate in what Victoria had promised would be a historic event to reaffirm our traditional family values. James arrived promptly at 8 o'clock, accompanied by Rachel, who wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress, and Isabella, radiant in her light pink dress, holding both their hands with the natural confidence of a child who felt loved. The whispers began immediately. "I can't believe he actually brought them," Margaret whispered to a group of socialites near the main entrance. "Victoria must be furious. Imagine the humiliation." What Margaret and the rest of the family didn't know was that every word was being picked up by microphones strategically placed throughout the room. David Chun had coordinated a documentation operation that would make history in investigative journalism. Victoria Whitmore approached the trio with a forced smile that couldn't completely hide the venom in her eyes. "James, dear, what a surprise to see you here with your friends. Mother, I'd like you to meet Rachel Torres, a teacher at Roosevelt Elementary School, and her daughter Isabella," James said with impeccable courtesy. "Rachel, this is my mother, Victoria Whitmore, president of the foundation." Victoria extended a reluctant hand as if touching something contaminated. Delighted, she lied shamelessly. "I hope you feel comfortable at our little event." Isabella, with the brutal honesty of children, tilted her head toward the voice. "Mrs. Victoria, your voice sounds sad. Are you sick?" The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel gently squeezed her daughter's hand while Victoria was completely speechless for the first time in decades. Senator Richard Whitmore quickly stepped forward to control the damage. Well, look who decided to show up," he said in his well-trained political voice. "James, I hope you've come to announce your return to reason." "Actually, Father, I've come to make a very important announcement about the future of the foundation," James replied, his voice carrying an authority that made some of those present sit up and take notice. "But first, how about we show our guests the art exhibition you've prepared?" What followed was a systematic display of hypocrisy and cruelty disguised as social etiquette. Margaret led the group to the art section where expensive paintings represented the history of Western civilization. Her commentary on each work was peppered with subtle but poisonous references to people who simply cannot appreciate high culture and the importance of maintaining certain standards. "This Monet was acquired directly from a private French collection," Margaret said, positioning herself so that Rachel and Isabella were clearly excluded from the circle of appreciation. "Of course, it takes a certain educational refinement to truly appreciate the technique." Rachel remained dignified, holding Isabella's hand and responding with intelligent questions about the painting techniques that left Margaret visibly irritated. But it was when they reached the grand piano that the cruelty reached its peak. "Isabella, dear," Victoria said with a false sweetness that fooled only those who didn't know her. "I've heard that special children like you sometimes have compensatory skills. How about playing something for us?" The piano was strategically positioned in the center of the room where everyone could watch what they obviously hoped would be an embarrassing spectacle. James felt anger rise like volcanic lava, but he forced himself to remain calm. This was exactly what David Chun had predicted. "If Isabella would like to play, it would be an honor," he said softly. Isabella let go of Rachel's hand and walked to the piano with the confidence of someone who had spent years developing an intimate relationship with music. Her fingers touched the keys delicately, finding their place. And then something magical happened. The first notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune flowed through the room with a purity and emotional depth that silenced everyone present. Isabella wasn't just playing. She was telling a story through music. Her small hands extracting nuances from the instrument that few professional pianists could achieve. The silence that followed was one of awe and shock. Isabella had transformed a moment of planned humiliation into a display of genuine talent that left the elite in attendance speechless. It was at that exact moment that James took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you all for attending our annual gala. As you know, our foundation is dedicated to supporting the education and development of underprivileged children. He paused, looking directly at his family. Today I would like to share with you the true impact of our work. The screens scattered around the room, which until then had displayed the foundation's logo, suddenly changed. Financial documents appeared in high resolution showing systematic misappropriation of funds intended for public schools. Fraudulent contracts, correspondence between corrupt politicians and the Whitmore family. Over the past 5 years, James continued in the same calm voice, our beloved foundation has embezzled more than $8 million that should have gone to children like Isabella. Victoria tried to interrupt, but her voice was drowned out by the sound system James now completely controlled. The screens began displaying screenshots of messages from the Operation Bring Back to His Senses group, where the family openly planned discriminatory strategies. It would be educational for her to see how truly civilized people behave, James read, projecting Margaret's message onto the main screen. Those were the words of my sister-in-law about Rachel, a dedicated teacher who works 2 jobs to give her daughter a dignified life. A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd. Journalists in attendance began frantically taking photos and filming. The foundation's live broadcast, which was supposed to celebrate its generosity, was turning into real-time documentation of its destruction. Senator Richard Whitmore tried to approach the stage, but security guards, not from the family, but hired by David Chun, discreetly blocked his way. And here, James said as audio recordings filled the room, we have my mother explaining how people like them just don't fit in at our family events, followed by my father discussing strategies for removing Black and Latino families from neighborhoods undergoing gentrification. The unmistakable voices of the Whitmores echoed through the hall, every word laden with prejudice and contempt. Victoria had gone completely pale while Margaret desperately tried to leave the room only to discover that all exits were being monitored by security cameras. For 3 months, James continued, I systematically documented how this family uses charity as a front to perpetuate the very injustices it claims to fight. While Isabella practices piano at an underfunded school, the $8 million embezzled financed dinners like this one. The last screen showed side-by-side photos. On one side, Roosevelt Elementary School with overcrowded classrooms and broken equipment. On the other, receipts for the Whitmore family's extravagant spending financed with foundation money. The FBI is currently executing search and seizure warrants at the family's homes and offices, James announced calmly. All of the foundation's assets have been frozen by the federal court. That's when Margaret completely lost control. You traitor, she screamed, trying to rush toward the stage. We gave you everything. Your company, your education, everything. And I used all of that to expose exactly who you really are, James replied. The company you mention? 70% of the current investors are ethical funds that withdrew their resources from the Whitmore family 6 months ago when they learned of the investigation. The final blow came when David Chun took the stage, introducing himself as the legal representative of 500 families who had been harmed by the foundation schemes. Class action lawsuits have already been filed. The estimated damages exceed $50 million. Victoria Whitmore, who had spent her entire life building a reputation as a respected philanthropist, collapsed into a chair as she watched decades of hypocrisy being exposed live to 300 influential people and thousands of online viewers. Senator Richard Whitmore, realizing that his political career was over, tried one last gambit. This is a smear campaign orchestrated by a resentful son. None of this proves anything. Father, James interrupted, his voice now laden with final authority. Your own words, recorded in your own home during family dinners, say everything that needs to be said. As the revelations piled up and the masks fell, one question remained. Was it possible to build bridges over such deep chasms of prejudice and privilege? In the center of that hall, where discrimination disguised as tradition once reigned, a new reality was now taking shape, like a symphony finally finding its harmony after years of dissonant notes, proving that true excellence knows no color, social class, or limitations imposed by those who fear true greatness. 6 months after the gala that destroyed the Whitmore empire, James ran the largest digital inclusion network in the country. His new office overlooking Central Park housed not only a thriving company, but a true purpose. Rachel entered carrying reports. Now director of educational programs, no longer the teacher overwhelmed by multiple jobs. Isabella followed her new technological glasses replacing the old model, allowing for even more independent navigation. 500 schools have implemented the system, Rachel said, handing over the results. Pass rates are up 37% in 5 months. Across town, Victoria Whitmore watched from the window of the small apartment she shared with Margaret. The penthouse had been confiscated along with cars, jewelry, and every fortune built on corruption. At 63, she worked as a receptionist, ironic for someone who had despised people who worked for a living. Senator Richard Whitmore had lost his seat and was facing criminal charges. Margaret, abandoned by her high society friends, had discovered that her arrogance had been tolerated only as long as she had the status to sustain the collective hypocrisy. The most painful thing was not the material loss, but the complete isolation. No club would accept them. No event would invite them. Isabella finished playing the piano and turned with a smile. When I grow up, I want to have a company like yours to help other children. James knelt beside her. You already have something more powerful than any company, Isabella. The ability to see people for who they really are. Rachel watched with tears of gratitude. 6 months earlier, she was a single mother struggling to give her daughter dignity. Now she had found stability, professional fulfillment, and true love. The Roosevelt School, where Isabella studied, had modern laboratories and a music program that attracted volunteer teachers. The other 499 schools that benefited were undergoing similar transformations. James realized he had discovered something that no family fortune could buy. True purpose. Revenge had not been driven by hatred, but by the need to stop injustices that had been perpetuated for generations. The best revenge, he murmured, looking out over the city, is not to destroy your enemies. It is to build something so meaningful that it renders them irrelevant. Isabella ran up holding a relief drawing. 3 people holding hands under a tree. This is us, a family that chose to find each other. A year ago, James was a lonely CEO sitting on a park bench on Christmas Eve. Today, he understands that family is not defined by blood, but by the choice to love and lift each other up. The family that tried to control him through blackmail lost their wealth, status, and the opportunity to witness the transformation that happens when privilege serves the common good. If this story of justice and true love touched your heart, subscribe to the Black Voices channel for more stories that prove that the best revenge is to lift up those who have been forgotten, showing that turning pain into purpose is the most powerful revolution there.